Alright, hello and welcome back everyone. This is my asset pack videos based on what we did and basically on how I approached the model and essentially what I did to do it. Now I've read the brief and essentially what I needed to include was at least two or three methods of modeling when doing this and two suitable ways of planar mapping and all that kind of stuff. So let's get right into it so that you guys understand. So my model that I created was a shelf. This was one of the first models I've done. And personally, it was a very easy model to create because of how simplistic and easy it was in order to do it. So, if you see here, yeah, there's a bit of problem. So, layout. So, first of all, I just start off with a single cube and, extrude it out. Now, the one thing I'll say is, it's like, where'd your concept at? What happened actually was I've created 5 different models of this, and throughout it, after I got comfortable to modeling it and understood how it looked, I could just wing it from my eye. You'll see what the concept art is like, and you'll understand. And the other models are actually on my Sketchfab, which are textured as well. So yeah, it's good practice, all that. So yeah, as you see here, I'm doing it by eye. I know the values that I want. So yeah, since we're creating a shelf, well, my topic was Japanese and futuristic, but for this, I just wanted a worn-out Japanese shelf that we're putting inside of our dojo with my partner that we're doing. So yeah, first of all, I head off straight to the UV editing because you want to get the maps out easily. So as you can see, at the bottom left, you can see the XYZ axis. So I use the planar map because it's well, because it's a cube and a cuboid like shape. There's no mesh surrounding the object. It doesn't really matter much for this. So literally, I could just go and select all these and just be like, yeah, those are another planar. Those are in the X direction because as you can notice on the grid below, the X axis is on the sides. No, wait. If I'm correct, the x-axis are actually coming out on the side, z-axis are left and right, and then y-axis is up and down on this. So yeah, I easily do it by creating all these maps for every single one. Let me move this thing out of the way. Yeah, so that happened. Then I wanted to create the layout. I wanted to put all in one box. Now, my way of doing this is really easy so that they're evenly done it. So as you can see there, those were my settings, and I'll go back to them. I'll actually go back to them, but essentially what my layout is essentially allows all the things to be quite laid out quite well so that they're all the same size and so that they go well together. So yeah. Now, yeah, this time I used the grid snaps because I thought it'd be essential when creating the wooden planks. I messed up a bit there. So essentially what I did with these wooden planks was I created them so they went off a bit, because if you look at Japanese culture, their shelves are quite weird. Well, I say weird, but it's, to us, ours are probably weird, but essentially it goes off at a slant at the ends. So by here, I actually bevel it so that I get more of a wooden plank like wood look. However, when doing this, I noticed the ends were a bit off for what I wanted to do. So I realized that I would have to probably go back and do those separately. So yeah, at this part I messed up. But yeah, beveling is really good if you want to smoothen the edges a bit or like, make it more detailed. It adds a bit more polygons, but it's not that bad because as you can see here, it kind of makes it look a lot nicer depending on how high you use it. For this, since we're going low poly, I didn't use that much, but you kind of get as you can see here, I got more of a plank kind of look. So then I tried it on the sides, and what it did, it made a really nice effect for me, in my personal opinion. It's as you can see when I go down, it actually creates a slanting kind of effect, and I thought, you know what, this could work extremely well. I didn't originally have it, but like since I tried it, it gave me an effect that I was like, you know what, I can modify this. It could look really nice when put into Substance Painter. So essentially that's what I did. So yeah, I then beveled it to the same values, because you want to keep it the same values, otherwise you're going to get a wonky looking board, which I guess you could have, but that's debatable. So yeah, um, at this point I wanted to UV map this as well, because an interesting fact is you can duplicate with transforms, and basically what that does is if you do the UV mapping first and then you do all this, you go to you go to edit duplicate with transforms and you press G. It transfers the UV maps over, but also it transfers the values of how much distance you want. So if you press G again, it's going to duplicate another wooden plank, but the exact same height difference that you want it to be. So that's really helpful. So yeah, over here, you're going to see my UV process. Now, the thing is, people are going to be like, why don't you fast forward this? I want the examiners to see how my work goes, because I noticed quite a lot of people just leave the this part and they're like, there's no talking over it, there's no nothing, it's just music in the background. And I realized, they don't essentially know what's happening. So right here, what essentially I'm doing is with the modifier unfolding, what it does is that you get the planar, but it comes out not the way you want it. Unfold will try and get it as best as it can to the length and width that it's supposed to be. Obviously, you're not going to get great results all the time, as it can be really weird looking and not accurate at all. Because as you can see here, yeah, these UV shells have gone weird, but they're perfect in the way of how the shell should be. So that's always helpful, but that one's upside down. So this is something you have to be wary of. It can be upside down. Now I have a grid snap lock on in the UV editor. So layout, and then the layout, as I said, it automatically does it for me. It gets the squares to the correct shape or size, and it works fairly well. So if people want to understand or know what my settings are, I'll leave it, and I'll explain it. So yeah, then as you can see here, I duplicate with values, press G, it automatically does it for me. I think I messed up a bit because I didn't put it to a grid snap, so I didn't like how it looked. So yeah, go back down, and then I press G again. It works automatically. It works well for me. And so far I got a really nice model. Now this part required a bit of extruding, because essentially what I did, I wanted a bar that surrounded the faces of the front faces of the wooden planks, but also it needed to connect it with the back. So as you'll see here, what I do is that I take this. Now, I could have easily changed the vertices to snap with each other. We lint this, and essentially what we could do is we could do vertex snapping. But the problem I had is when I did it with the other, it completely messed up my UVs. And with the model, how it was going already, I wasn't going to take that risk. So in the end, I kind of batted it from eye. And, essentially, I was happy with the results because it actually looks really good in the final design, because I'm going over this and voicing it afterwards. But it's really nice because of how much detail I managed to get into it. I could have gone more into it, but when I tried it, it essentially didn't work to the way I wanted it to, even with the paintbrush. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to leave it. It looks good, it seems good, why cause so much more effort for myself when it's already in a good state? So obviously you could go that bit further, but that's something I do in my spare time, and since we're on a deadline, it's like, okay, what works well, how am I going to get there, and etc. So, if you're on a deadline, don't always cause more work for yourself. Now here I inserted the edge loops. Now, as I said, with edge loops, essentially what they do is they create another mesh for you to create. So it essentially creates two meshes then, because you're creating another subdivision. So as you can see here, essentially what it means is like I got one cuboid and then one cube attached to it. So at this point, yeah, as you can see by there, you can see the subdivision. Now, I need to extrude this part, because this is the part I was on about where the shelf part had to be in front of it. And, this part I had to also guesstimate how it would work. But you'll see soon enough I insert another edge loop so that I can extrude it outwards so that it reaches towards the top of the shelf, as you can see here. Now, it was a bit too high, and when I did it again, it was a bit too low. So essentially what I did was I kind of moved it up a bit so that it looked as if it was reaching it. And when doing it, it didn't really bother me too much, because like you see here, there's that little bit by there. I just moved it up a bit, as you can see here, as best as I could. And what I found was, like, when I did this, it didn't really look that different. I was like, you know what? It works. Because it does work. What extruding does, it adds more geometry onto the mesh. And it's extremely good for when creating more complicated models such as this, instead of having to keep reusing another cube. Because it just creates unnecessary amount of polygons and faces. So, you know, I was about to duplicate this, but then I realized I had to do the map planer for this. So yeah, this part was really you know, my way of doing it is very formal. I get the sides, I find out what sides I need to use, and then I simply make it to something that seems more organized. What I've noticed some people do is they use automatic all the time. And even though it's good and Substance can do most of the work, the problem is you're going to get stretched UVs. And Substance does a good job, but not necessarily it's always going to work. So I don't trust Substance, my UV planers, that much with automatic, so I do it myself. And even though it requires a lot of time and effort, you know, it's a very time length process. I don't mind it too much because I get some of the best results probably with how my stuff looks. I'm really proud of how my stuff looks. But yeah, at this part, now I did a problem here. And I accidentally used this part as a y-axis, even though this is clearly a z-axis, as you can see on the XYZ grid. And I realized, oh, flip, what am I doing here? So yeah, so I got rid of that part. So I just did the top parts then. And then I did that, since that is on the x-axis, I select all of them, and then I select the stuff on the inside, because obviously since they're both opposite directions, like they're on the same faces, you need to do them on the same planar map. So that side and the other side are both on the z-axis, so you know, I could have pressed F here to frame it, essentially, because I keep moving around so much, but then it's like, I don't, a lot of problems I get with framing it is that, yeah, see here I did it on the wrong thing. I did it on the X instead of Z. A lot of problems I get mainly is with sometimes the more complicated models, and I have to cut and split some of the edges sometimes. And I actually had to do that with my mountain model, which you'll see another video of. And essentially, the reason behind that is because the cut and split allows you to cut that mesh away so that you could create more other faces on it instead of it all being one huge material. So now, here you go again. Here's my layout. And it looks great. You know, there aren't any problems. It looks brilliant. And the UVs are good. There's no stretching, and literally all I do is I duplicate again, because that's the way it works. So it's great, you know. I had no problems. At this point, oh wait, didn't I duplicate it? No. At this point, I needed to create the underboards for the wood planks, because you know, if I left those, the planks would literally be just floating in midair. So I couldn't do that. So what I did was I resized it so that they were little planks that fitted underneath and joined in with the wood holders at the front. I kind of did this by eye again because, as I said before, you know, I've done this model a ton of times now. It's even on my Sketchfab for multiple times. There's another fully finished model, but then I redid it and it looked even better. So the one thing I'm going to point out here is essentially I'm doing the same thing, and I've used 3 different things. I've used extrusion modeling, essentially, which allows you to put another geometry mesh upon another mesh. I've inserted edge loops, which basically subdivides the material into potentially another shape. So like essentially my first thing was a cuboid at the bottom, inserted edge loop, and then I had a cuboid and a cube. So then I could then extrude the model upwards, essentially add another mesh. And I've also beveled the wooden planks in order to get that slanted thing, also to add a bit more depth and detail into it, instead of it being one huge cuboid, it essentially allows you to make it seem more smooth and refined. And that's what a lot of people don't do in some low poly games. And, you know, you have to remember, you know, even though there's a limit, you can still use a little bit of beveling to make it seem that much nicer. You know, there's no problems with it. You just got to be careful how many times you use it. And, yeah, so those are the three main modeling techniques I've used in this one. So I can confidently say I've used those. And then I also, at the moment, I've done a lot of UV planar mapping. And as you can see here, I've used my techniques of the XYZ planar and also my layout and unfolding. So that's another bonus on it. And it literally, at this point, it's all done. All I need to do is duplicate these. And then after that... yeah, you can see here I'm using the X snap grid for my models as well. You know, I gotta be careful. I look inside so that that's there. You may be wondering why. It's like just so that I know. You may be thinking, you know, it's meshing up the meshes while you're doing that. If you don't see it, it doesn't matter. You'll see a little bit of it, but like it's important to have it so that it looks good instead of it potentially having to be in the wrong place. So at the moment, I think this looks really good. So yeah. Literally at this point I can just duplicate it. Yeah, duplicate that, then I'll duplicate the small underside ledges. And I think what the thing that I find really easy is the modeling part and the yeah. Originally I was gonna rig the model so that I could reuse several assets and essentially morph the thing, because I've learned how to do that. But then I realized, you know, it was creating unnecessary effort once again, so I just left it. So don't overdo yourself if, like, you've done it already. It's like, it's just creating way more unnecessary amounts of work. But, like, I will have stuff up on that. But, like, yeah. The UVs are fine. Everything's fine. It transfers over. You know, I'm really happy with the amount of work that went into this, because, you know, I've done it so many times, I found it so easy to do, and, you know, it works perfectly. It's what the brief asked for me, and, yeah, you know, all this happens. Now, the one thing I will also be showing is creating my own custom IDs, which kind of comes underneath the texturing process, but, you know, I'll show it in this part as well, because why not? So, yeah, all the things go through. Now, the one thing when taking it, so yeah, everything comes through, you know, that's essentially it done. So, what we went over was beveling, edge tools, extrusion modeling. So I did all that. Then UV planar, planar mapping. Yeah, as you can see here, I group all of them together. I do all of them together so that when putting them into substance, there'll be one material, there'll be one Lambert, because when putting it into substance, essentially, if you assign a new material, it recognizes it as a new mesh. So I want to do this with all the different parts that are going to potentially have different effects to it. So different detail and all that. So like the under ledges are going to be darker because not so much light's going to be hit on it. So yeah. So yeah, we went over edge loops, extrusion, and beveling. We went over UV mapping, unfolding, and layout. And yeah, we're going to be going, that's essentially everything I had to include. And, you know, I'm really happy. If you look here, it doesn't look much at the moment, but when you see the concept art and all that, you'll understand what I was going for. And right here, this is the part where I'm adding the new materials. So I give them all a sensible naming. So wooden planks, then I put stuff like wooden side holders, wooden front holders, or wooden back, and then yeah, all that. So as you can see here, I am now calling it wooden hold. So because, you know, it holds the planks and all that, you know, it keeps it all together. So now I'm going to call these, I believe I call these wooden under again, based on what it's underneath, and it's supposed to be holding the meshes. So yeah, essentially, as of problem solving, I did run into a few problems um, originally, but that was mainly based on the um, the UV mapping. And after this, I'll pause it and I'll say what went well, but what could have been better, because of how many times I've done it. And now I saved my scene as a new scene, because essentially when going to put this into Substance, I want to keep my original shelf asset, and then I want to create a shelf asset ID, because we need to do that, and then I delete all my history on the thing. We need to change the colors for it to be an ID. Now, it may not come up. Some people get this error, and actually, we had this a long time ago, and nobody knew what to do. What it simply is, you have to just press 6, because what you don't realize is your textures aren't on, and essentially these colors are textures. So, yeah, so I'm given these all different colors to use. So when I put it into Substance, I can, design each part of those. So yeah. It was a lot of fun, but yeah, so that's my ID version, and that's pretty much it. And I then save it off as a new asset, as a new scene, as underscore IDs, capital. And that's about it. Now, the one thing I will say is I do eventually go off to export these as an FBX, as you have to for Substance. And originally this is all it was, and it was really good for me to practice my skills even more to get better results in the end. What went well, in my opinion, this was really quick for a model. People can take an hour, they don't know what to do. This took around 18 minutes overall. Even though the thing may be longer, but like it took 18 minutes overall, which is really quick. Even with the UV mapping and all that, because of how efficient I can do it now, because of how many times I've done it. So I feel that I've gotten to a point where I'm extremely comfortable with what I do, because I know what I want to do. I want to become this stuff can come into jobs such as modeling and texturing, especially for scenes, for films and all that. I eventually want to go off as a freelance animator and create my own stuff, such as Lucas the Spider and etc. But what went well is really good time. Timing wise, I did great. I was able to complete this in a lot less time and with maximum good results. And it's a focal point, sure, because I'll use it once or twice, but it didn't take that long, and it's an asset that'll be used, that'll be really good for our scene. What could have gone better probably was the fact that first I didn't create those miniature underwood planks as a different cube. I actually used edge loops, and from there it messed up. It created more time for the UV mapping, and that's kind of something I realized halfway through. It was like, okay, how do I save time? Because at the moment I'm wasting too much time. And it was mainly the fact that I was like, why don't you just create a new cube mesh so that you can create it, make it smaller so it hangs under, and then you can get rid of some of the faces because they're going into the back wall and the front wall. I was like, you know what, that'll work. And also I didn't transfer over the UVs originally. I did it for every single one of them, and I was an idiot doing that. So yeah, I could have saved time, but I'm happy with how it got. And this is the first part of my Shelf Asset Pack video. I'll have a video on the texturing process and also put it into Unreal Engine. So I hope this was good enough for my brief, the first asset model. And until my next video, thank you very much, and this is part 1.